What's up, everybody? This is Kaz Denizon with Cuirass Productions, and today we are joined by Christian Williams, creator of Ends Reach. Christian, how are you doing today, man?
Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is the first interview I've done for anything Cuirass related, so that's exciting.
Well, I'm glad to have you. The whole point of the Atari Dev Space is to be able to talk about people who are developing new things, especially indie developers. So, speaking of which, for those who may not have heard of who you are or what you're doing, why don't you give everybody a rundown of what your plans are for the future?
Yeah, sure. So Cuirass Entertainment at the moment is a one-man show. We've had people come and go throughout the years working on different projects, but at the moment, it's I'm the sole owner and the sole developer. Um, we've worked on some smaller games in the past, some stuff that was released for free online.
Mhm.
And myself, I'm a full-time developer. That's my career. That's my day job. That's my 40 hour. Um, so indie game development stuff is a side gig for me. I've done the occasional freelancing, that whole thing. So I've been around for a while in the dev space, but I would say Ends Reach is probably the largest project I've worked on in which I was responsible for the greatest bulk of it.
Okay.
So, I've shipped games and worked on tons of games in studios, but that's a slice of the pie kind of deal.
Right.
Whereas this is a game where I'm responsible for 98% of it. So it's a very different experience.
So how does that feel, knowing that you have your first independent game built from the ground up, pretty much having the main focus on it? How does that feel knowing that you did all of this and now soon people are going to get a chance to see it?
It feels good. It's a bit of both, right? It feels great because you've done so much and you're able to express yourself in a very realistic way. Like the only features in the game are features that I wanted, right?
Right.
But that comes on the flip side is you feel more responsible for mistakes,
Right.
right? Just things like that, like issues that come up in development, decisions that you have to make. You second guess yourself a lot more, I think, when you are the maybe that's not true for all developers. I know myself, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so
Okay.
I second guess decisions a lot, and I go back and change things and things of that nature. So I think it's been a change of pace for me,
Okay.
having worked primarily on other people's games prior to this.
If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been in the developmental field? Like, what's your lineage like?
Well, I worked in web development as far back as 2011. That was very minor. I wouldn't even really say that was like full development. That was more like just editing websites and making and fixing requests for people. And that was kind of right before the reactive JavaScript era of web development. So that was a lot of like CSS editing and just stuff like that. Um, but then I started in the game industry officially around 2017.
Nice.
That was when I got my first job working on video games. Um, and so I've worked on, I would say, about 10 to 12 projects since then, both in studios and freelance.
Okay.
Um, and that was primarily mobile development for the most part, like Unity, Android, iOS kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, so this technically is the first time I've worked on a console game as
Nice.
well.
So is this only going to be on the VCS for the time being, or is it going to be like a timed exclusive?
Yeah, for the time being, the game has been built with the VCS in mind. So that includes working within the limitations of the default hardware.
Right.
So like I know some people they spec up their VCSs and stuff like that. I've built it assuming that the customer has not, right?
Right.
Um, so that included, radically tweaking the base game quite a bit to make it fit the VCS requirements. But yeah, the primary platform right now is the VCS. It's the primary platform that it's being tested on and has been played on for the last 6 months.
Right.
So
So you've
I,
been
I sorry.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
Oh
was
yeah, no, I was saying I have future plans with the game, but I don't really know what they are yet. I'm totally content letting it be a VCS game for the time being.
okay. So let me ask you this question real quick. And I've interviewed other people before regarding the VCS, and some have said that it's actually a much more powerful console than people give it credit for. Some have said that it's as simple as, and I'm
Sure.
paraphrasing, of course, something so simple as to build a game in Unity, throw it on the VCS. Right? There's next to very little limitations to what you can do as far as getting your game on the VCS because it is a developer's platform. What has your experience with that been like?
Yeah, I would say that's fairly accurate. I mean, in my view, I think anything that can run an operating system and can generate graphics is probably powerful enough to make a game for.
Okay.
But the VCS has a fairly good performance profile. In that I didn't really have to do originally. I guess I should go back a few months to kind of go through the process of it. But originally the game was being built for PC, and the consoles in mind at the time were um, more of a AAA sort of performance profile. So things like the PS4
Mhm.
or like the Series S, things like that,
Mhm.
current and next gen consoles. So the game originally was actually built with 4K texture maps, and it had much larger environments.
Okay.
Um, so I did actually have to make quite a few concessions to get the Atari VCS version to look as good as it does and run as good as it does.
Right.
But it wasn't an extreme. Like this wasn't a 6 month rework of the game or anything like that. But it was mostly just shortening the size of some rooms, lowering the texture maps away from 4K because we do not have that kind of video RAM by default on the VCS.
Mhm.
But overall, I was able to keep the bulk of the game's vision. And oh, buddy, come on! I warned you about him. He's very rambunctious right now.
It's okay. I have
Um,
him on my feet right now.
yeah, he's. I guess we can introduce them. Yeah, so he's gonna do that probably a few times today. My apologies for
Notice that
that.
I just got a message from you on Discord. I didn't even see
Yep,
it.
that was him.
That was Stella, that nice big ball of fluff and fat. But what's yours?
This is Yelpton. He's
Oh,
a good boy, but he's very anxious about the storm outside. So he's being a little bit of a demon.
gotcha. Getting back into the interview, I want to ask a few questions about your game In's Reach, seeing as you said this is going to be a temporary exclusive for the VCS. I've seen the trailer for the game. I've seen a little bit of gameplay footage for it, and I know that you said that you've spent the last 6 months developing it. In your own words, what kind of game would you say this is? It looks almost like an adventure platformer, kind of like an open world. What would you define
Sure.
it as?
I should correct you there. I've been QAing it for 6 months. It's actually been in development for almost 3 years now.
Okay.
It started development in early 2020.
Okay.
So it was actually full time development during a freelance period for me
Right.
for a good bulk of 2020. So it's been in the QA polishing phase for about 6 months now.
Hmm.
Yeah, so just a minor correction. But yeah, it is definitely a open world adventure game. The two games that inspired it that I've tried to avoid using in the marketing or the discussion of it, but games like the 3D Zelda games and the Metroid games and stuff like that.
Right.
So it very much is a game about exploring, finding items, revealing new areas that you can access with these items, things of that nature.
Mhm.
Um, and I use the word open world lightly because there are loading zones and there are areas that you have to like load into. So
Right.
it's open exploration, but it's not necessarily something like Breath of the Wild or Assassin's Creed or anything like that where it's completely seamless world.
Right.
But it's somewhere in the middle. Like there are definitely areas that you can go to out of linear sequence and explore things um, kind of as you wish.
So, what is something that VCS users can expect the moment that they pick up your game? Like, what's one key thing that you would encourage them to look for?
Check corners, look for hidden caves.
Nice.
There are 2 or 3 hidden items within the first 5 minutes of the tutorial. So that's kind of I consider that to be part of the tutorial, really. That there are these items that you can find kind of in unassuming places.
Right.
So I would encourage people definitely to keep an eye out for everything that they can find. And in the testing that we've done, people seem to spend the majority of their time peeking around and just seeing if they've missed something, which I find really funny to watch, actually.
So, one thing about your game, and this is in no way at all trying to be a comparison, but one thing about your game, it reminds me, it reminds me of a game that was featured on the Xbox back in like the early 2000s called Azaric. Are you familiar with it?
No, actually, I'm not.
So basically, and I'll keep this very short because I don't want to take up too much of your time here. But basically, it's this character in this like open fantasy world that has like all these elemental aspects and so on and so forth. And you have to go and you have to get these elemental discs to bring the world back to peace. Um, and the reason why it reminds me of that particularly is because looking at the trailer and the control mechanics, the way that the character walks and the way that it interacts with the environment, it makes it feel it kind of gives me a sense of nostalgia looking at it in a modern way,
Mhm.
and I say that as a compliment. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing it hit the VCS. One thing that perplexes me, um, actually, I don't want to say it perplexes me. One thing that piques my curiosity is the story of the game. Is there a story that we can follow? Is there a general narrative?
Yeah, and that will be introduced as soon as the opening cutscene starts.
Mhm.
I'm going for a fairly hands-off approach to storytelling.
Okay.
It's more of a, if you want to learn more about the game, there are avenues in the game to discover more of the plot. But
Mhm.
it's not a narratively driven game. I wouldn't say that there's many cutscenes. Most of the cutscenes in the game introduce mechanics or enemies or environments.
Okay.
They don't introduce there many characters or anything like that. There are core characters in the game that the central plot circles around, but they're 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 limited in scope. You're only going to interact with them occasionally.
Mhm.
Um, and beyond that, the basics of the plot are um, essentially that your character is going to appear in this environment and they forget how they got there
Okay.
and they stumble upon a crashed ship. And the opening cutscene will introduce the crashed ship and show how it crashed. And that's sort of your narrative cue to begin your adventure, is to explore the crashed ship. Actually, in the recent gameplay trailer that I put out, the uncut gameplay, I think it was about 8 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, you actually see a big chunk of that, which is the lead up to the ship and the exploration of the ship. Um, and then the game sort of branches off from there as you find details on the ship about where to go next.
Okay.
So that's really all I'm willing to tell at the moment without spoiling huge chunks of the game. But that's your first narrative cue, is that you're going to be looking for crew members from the ship,
All right.
and it kind of all begins from there.
Well, I at least appreciate you giving us that much of information.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've checked out your website. I've seen some of the things that you've developed, and I noticed that you have two other products actually that you're currently working on, or you have one released and one is a work in progress. You might be able to correct me on that, but you have one called Carrier, and another one called Planet Goo. What can you
Mhm.
tell us about those?
Planet Goo was a game jam that we did probably like 5 years ago now. And that was sort of, it was the first game that like me and my friend group completed that was I would say mechanically sound and
Hmm.
actually like fun to complete and balanced. And that was a puzzle game. It was sort of like Lemmings, where you
Oh,
had these goos that would spawn at the beginning of a level and they would move and you'd have to they had different abilities, like you could place ones that would block, ones that would allow you to jump over them, just different things like that. And that was never released um, publicly, I don't think, outside of the Game Jam website. Which, if it's still up, you would be able to download it if you dug for it.
okay.
But that was never like a product. That was just a game that we had released kind of out into the wild through the Game Jam. And Carrier was a similar thing. It was the same group of people, the same bulk of people. We did another puzzle game, except this time we thought that it was a novel enough idea that we decided to complete it and polish it and add additional levels to it. And so that actually hit Steam as a completely free to play game. It's still on Steam, actually.
Okay.
Um, and that was more an exercise in game publishing, right? Just to get, you know, could we get a stable build onto Steam ready for thousands of people to download, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, both games I would say were more learning experiences more than products.
Okay.
But Carrier has a pretty good review score on Steam, so people liked it as at least as a free to play game, and we were happy with that. So
So this is a question that I asked for pretty much the majority of the people that I have or will be
sure.
interviewing. What is the chances of us seeing Carrier released on the VCS, perhaps for free?
I actually had not even thought about it, to be honest, until you brought it up. It's totally possible. I think the control scheme, I think, would work pretty easily with both the classic and the modern controller,
Hmm.
because it was just a two-button game, really. In the original game, you used A and D to rotate objects to complete the puzzles. So it would be probably fairly easy to port. It was actually developed on Linux originally. So the bulk of my development back then was all on the Linux operating system.
Right.
So it's already been tested on Linux quite a great deal. So Yeah, I had not even thought about that. So
I mean, it could be an untapped, possibility. But if anybody who's watching this might be curious about that, drop a comment below. So, getting back into your current project, Ends Reach, is there anything perhaps exclusive that you can share with us and share with the audience? Something that maybe you've not released yet.
yeah, so I have been working on a new trailer. I've been trying to get one every few months, that explains, something new. The previous one was the Worlds trailer where I showed snippets of each of the environments that the players would be able to explore.
Right.
And I've been, because the game is so focused on exploration and stuff like that, I've been trying to avoid showing like any of the really secret stuff. But I have been cutting a trailer to explain one of the newest mechanics, which
Right.
is the powers, the weapon powers. And so I actually have cut a really quick video just to explore what these powers are and how they work. And you can show that if you'd like, and I can talk about that. Basically, each of the weapons in the game enables certain powers that the player can use to both in combat and in exploration. And to this point, I have not, I don't think, really shown any of it outside of the basic combat. So I cut a really brief video that just shows some of the ice magic that you'll be able to use in the game when you acquire the ice powers. And basically, they are just designed to make combat feel a little bit more exciting. Because one of the philosophical problems I ran into early on was that combat was really, really difficult originally.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really going for that style of game. So I simplified combat a tiny bit. And to make up for that, I added in these powers that the player has access to so that they can feel pretty powerful when they accumulate all the items.
How
Uh,
many how many like abilities and weapons can people perhaps unlock throughout the entirety of the game?
telling you the full number of weapons would be a huge spoiler. So I'll just say there's more than three.
Okay.
Um, and roughly there's 3 to 4 powers per weapon. And they were designed again to sort of give identity to each of the weapons and to give replay value to the weapons as well.
How
Like
large
they're
of a game file is this going to be? I think the largest one to date on the VCS is the Atari 50, which is you need about 9 gigabytes of free space. I think it's like
yeah,
4.7
I would
gig.
say we could probably guess it would be around that. It's a fully 3D game, and I did reduce the texture size quite a bit,
Yeah.
but just due to the sheer amount of content and stuff in the game, it is pretty big.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's been cool to evolve the game over time, and that's sort of one of the things that um, I learned, like especially adding these powers in, was I learned to perhaps be more player focused in my design through the course of this game, where originally it was designed more for somebody like myself to play, and it was designed at a difficulty level for somebody like myself to get through.
Right.
And then once people started to test it, they had difficulty figuring out the combat. So I sort of flipped it to be more player focused, so the player feels more powerful and has access to more abilities and more things like that. Um,
From those who have tested your game, what has their reception been? Do you feel comfortable disclosing that?
yeah, absolutely. Exploration seems to be the main thing that people really like. Um, there are a few people who have mostly beaten the game multiple times, and exploring the world and finding new things seems to have been what they liked the most. So based off that feedback, that was what I sort of doubled down on.
Mhm.
Not to like a Donkey Kong 64 degree where I didn't just like load the game full of stuff, but I added more environmental puzzles and more open world puzzles and stuff like that for people to unlock new items and new things. So I was
Your your
sorry.
in, your inspirations for the game, how other than obviously inspiring you to you know to make a game, how have they impacted you as a developer? Like as far as like opening your mind to what should be done, what shouldn't be done, how has it kind of opened your
That's a
mind?
really good question. I would say you learn a little bit of humility working on a project this big.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people go into projects thinking that they know the best way to do something. And one of the great parts about game design is you get to really experiment a lot. So I went into this game thinking that I would know all of the solutions kind of right off the bat because I've played so many similar games. And then you kind of realize why developers make a lot of the decisions that they do.
Right.
Like I said, with the player focused design, like I thought that the game would be more exciting if it was really difficult, but people really just didn't like it. The parts of the game that they liked were mitigated by random deaths or cheap deaths or things like that. And so it almost took me back in time to the 80s and early 90s where a lot of games were difficult in ways that were just like really unfair.
Right.
And that was kind of the norm, but I kind of had to go back to the basics and think and really think about like, do I want that mechanic to be so dominant in the game, or do I want the bulk of my players to die in moments like this? You know, like of course I still want the game to be fairly challenging, and I think it is. I think people will find it fairly challenging still, but it was kind of interesting. Like even just things like environmental puzzles.
Hmm.
I one day I thought I had a massive epiphany where I started implementing more physics into the puzzles, and I thought I was doing such like cool things, and then I realized like Half-Life 2 did this stuff. Like, you know, but it's just funny. Like, you get so excited implementing new things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. And I feel like that's massive growth as a game designer. Um, right? You just sometimes you take for granted some of the really simple things that other developers have already come up with, and you don't even think about them until they become a problem for you in your game.
The Now I've seen in your gameplay footage and in your trailer footage, I've seen very simple yet interesting creature designs. And one of the questions that I want to ask you is, where do your inspirations for some of these characters come into play? Was it hard to create them, or did you have a team of people to help you with the?
Um, Early on, I had a ooh, buddy. We can just cut there, I guess.
No, we'll
Um,
keep it in. He's got the zoomies.
okay, sure. Um, yeah, so early on, I had a 3D artist that I was working with for the first few months. And so some of the early designs were designed by me and then provided by the 3D modeler.
Mhm.
Everything since then has been me primarily. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I've been told I'm a pretty childish designer. I kind of just come up with some stupid thing and I'm like, let's put it in. So like the main bulk of enemies that you'll be fighting at the beginning are mostly like insectoid type creatures, and their design, I basically just I drew an ant with robot legs on a with colored pencils, and I tried to just make it look funny and cool at the same time, and sent it off to him, and he laughed at it, and then modeled it, and I think they look really cool. They kind of remind me of like the PS2 era of enemy designs where things are just sort of like goofy and edgy at the same time.
Yeah, I see.
Um,
I see what you're going with.
yeah,
I think there was a game called Dark Angel. Like one of the bosses was a person who rolled around like a turtle and an armadillo. It was weird. That was PS2.
yeah. I kind of like that sort of stuff. I like not really taking the game design too seriously.
Right.
Like I'm more of an atmosphere focused developer. So like I want the look of environments and the music and everything to sort of like match and create an immersive sort of feeling.
Actually, that raises another question. Take us through the music design. Like, where do most of your music design like inspirations come from?
Sure. Not to embellish myself too much, but I've been a musician for at least 15 years, I would say, including like live performances and stuff like that. Originally, I was big into guitar and drumming, and a lot of like metal and stuff like that.
Right.
And then when it came to the game side of things, I really liked electronic music and things like that, like Aphex Twin and just like intricate, kind of interesting electronic music.
Things that kind of make you want to go.
Yeah, just things that are like really um, ambient, but like I like rhythm, I like beats, but I like ambience.
Mhm.
So it kind of all comes together for me in a game like this. I would say the bulk of my game design comes from uh, just feeling inspired to sort of create an atmosphere. Yeah, I generally I get sort of I get inspiration from audio a lot and music a lot.
Mhm.
So I kind of reciprocate that. So I'll feel inspired to make a new environment. Like the desert environment is very ambient in this game. It
Hmm.
doesn't really feel like most deserts. Most deserts feel like arid and dry and sort of unforgiving.
Hmm.
And the area in this game, which is just known as the Mesa, is it's very like full of life and luscious just because of the kind of music that I wrote for it.
Nice.
I felt like the music demanded things like blowing wind and leaves and plants everywhere and stuff like that. So I made it more of like a tropical world.
Right.
And yeah, it's just kind of everything builds on itself.
So speaking of like these worlds and these environments and stuff, what about bosses? Are there going to be any boss levels in this? Can you
Yeah,
share with
each of
us?
the environments is complete with bosses. They're more of like the set piece kind of boss sort of thing. They're very big and like they're not like a Zelda boss necessarily where it's like a one-on-one with a character.
Mhm.
It's in this game it's almost like you're fighting like a room, like the whole room is sort of the boss fight, like with platforming and things like that in the midst of it,
Okay.
which was, I don't know if that will make for a better game, but I just felt like because I had platforming elements and all these different things, I felt like perhaps I should try to tie them together in the boss fights.
Nice.
So
Now, I unfortunately don't want to cut you off here, but we're coming up to the last 5 minutes of the timer.
yep.
So let's go ahead and take this time to ask this question. Where can people find you? What is something that you also want the viewer who's watching right now to know to look out for from Curious Entertainment? Is it Curious or
It's
Curious?
Cuirass, as in like the armor piece.
Ah, okay. So Curious Entertainment.
Yep.
Sorry. Bad.
You can find the official website, cuirass.net. There also is a Twitter that I rarely ever update, but you can be assured that anytime there is something really important news, like a release date or anything, outgoing marketing material,
Right.
it will be there. Probably the most updated thing at the moment is the Facebook page for Ends Reach. That's where I've had the most engagement with people. I have to apologize; he's going a little wild here.
It's okay.
Um, but yeah, that's where you can find the bulk of my media releases and trailers and stuff like that. I also post in the VCS Discord. I believe that's where you found me.
Mhm.
So trailers and videos and stuff will go up there as well.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I mean that's really, I'm not much of a social media guy, so I am very bad at updating that stuff. The Cuirass website is going to be going through an overhaul in the next month or so, to make Ends Reach more of a focal point of the website and provide better information for people who will be interested in the game.
Right.
So you can look forward to that as well.
So when can we possibly see Ends Reach come to the Atari VCS? What's the end goal, like the end day?
Yeah. Well, I originally I had told people 2022 would be an ambitious timeline
Mhm.
for the game, just due to its scope. QAing it is fairly difficult.
Right.
Um, so 2023, without a doubt. And I would like to release in the first half of 2023. I don't really need to hide much information about the game. Most of it's been out there for a while. So, the main thing is the bulk of development is finished on the game. You can start it and play all the way to the end.
Mhm.
But like I said earlier, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I don't want to release something that I don't feel proud of.
Right. You.
So I've been taking the extra time to kind of get these builds as airtight as possible and have as many different types of players play test the game. I really want, it's like I said, I had people play test the game that were so bad at it that I had to really consider some of the decisions I have been making. Like, is the average player going to be able to get through this? So yeah.
So first quarter is the estimated projection that we could see Ends Reach, which is
Yeah, I
cool.
would say definitely the first half of the year for sure. Um, I would like to have it out sooner than later, if that helps narrow it down a little bit. But I think that's really going to depend on how good the rest of the QA goes. Um, you definitely will know the release date when I know it.
Right.
Um, and so, also if there's anybody with experience QAing who wants to reach out to me through the VCS Discord, I can start allowing people the opportunity to try it. Um, but I think that's going to be sort of a selective process, like people who don't mind putting in some time to get some good feedback and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm interested in wrapping up the game. I feel like it's getting really close to ready, but I can't give like a pinpointed release date yet because I wouldn't want to disappoint anybody.
Gotcha.
So
Fair enough.
yeah,
Well, we're coming up on our last 60 seconds. I wanted to take a moment real quick to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to
yeah,
and to get this exclusive content out for Ends Reach.
yeah,
I hope that you guys watching have enjoyed the video. If you happen to have any questions for Mr. Williams over here, drop it in the comments below so that way we can make sure that we can do a part two for this interview. Maybe get some new information. What do you think?
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I've been Kaz Denizan with Crash Productions, and we'll see you in the next one.